Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Mocktail Minutes. This is Bailey.
And this is Brianna.
This week, I am drinking a Poppi, my favorite cherry limeade flavor.
I almost got Poppies, but Costco is out of those flavors. They just have like the soda
Oh,
one.
yeah.
And I don't know if I like those. So I got Olipop. They have strawberry vanilla.
Oh, that one's really good.
I think it's my favorite. I also like the ginger one. And the ginger one my husband won't drink. So I usually get those because I know they'll stay around.
Yeah. I actually just was reading yesterday that Olipops are not necessarily recommended if you are pregnant because they have herbs in them in their proprietary blend.
Oh, yeah. That's a good disclaimer. I think like anything proprietary, like that when they don't have to disclose, is like a little iffy when you're pregnant.
So many rules with pregnancy.
I haven't even thought to look at that. I don't drink any Olipop.
Such a bummer. I mean, I've had one since I've been pregnant, so
we're good.
But I'm not doing any more.
Yeah. The more you know.
Yes, today we are talking artificial sweeteners. So this is part 2 to our 2-part series. You guys really liked the last episode on added versus natural sugars. Yeah. So I'm glad we did this, and I'm glad we broke it up into 2 because I think it just, allowed you to be able to listen to it better and kind of actually take in the information than having us give you every single thing at one time.
Makes it digestible.
Yes. We're talking artificial sweeteners today, so we're going to go over just what are artificial sweeteners, examples, and kind of some things to be mindful about with artificial sweeteners. And then we both also had a few questions come up, so we'll answer some of them as we go through, and then we'll also kind of do a little Q&A at the end.
So for those of you that don't know, artificial sweeteners are sugar substitute, so they're designed to mimic the sweetness of natural sugar without having any calories. They're sweet. They're usually much sweeter than like normal table sugar. So this allows for you to be able to use a lot less of them to get the same amount of sweetness. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
I was actually talking to one of Josh's cousins the other day. She was using, because she always asks me all the nutrition questions, and she was using, Splenda or something. And so she was asking me about it. And I was like, well, it's just like a sugar substitute. And she's like, well, if I use sugar, it's not sweet enough. I have to add so much. I was like, well, actually, your Splenda is so much more sweeter than that sugar. Yeah. So that is kind of one thing that we'll get into a little bit. But really, I would say the artificial sweeteners, they kind of started around to help essentially with weight management, but also diabetes. So there's lots of things that we can absolutely go into with these artificial sweeteners. But those are kind of the main things they were brought in to be used for. But like Brianna said, they're usually much more sweet than like a table sugar. So we need a lot less to sweeten it. But your examples could be like aspartame, saccharin, sucralose, acesulfame potassium or ACE-K. And then you also have like stevia and monk fruit, which aren't technically artificial sweeteners. They're more of like a natural substitute because they are from a plant. And then those natural sweeteners are ones that we talked about last episode. That's like your honey, your maple syrup, agave, because they're coming directly from a plant source, where artificial sweeteners are going to be synthetically created or kind of extracted. It's not as natural is a good way to kind of think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not made in a lab, right? I mean, technically, if you're extracting things from a plant, that happens in a lab, but you kind of get the gist of it. You can find it in nature and extract it in its normal form.
Yeah, where artificial sweeteners, they were kind of created so that it was an option for those looking to decrease the sugars when weight loss or to help manage diabetes. So I think with this episode too, it's kind of one of those gray areas where it's not use sugar or use artificial sweeteners. I think we can kind of fit them both in. I do get the question a lot of what artificial sweeteners do I use? And when I think about it, I honestly don't use a ton. I would say I mean, I've had monk fruit in my pantry before. I never really used it. I don't,
Yeah.
which is
I
not like
use,
an artificial sweetener.
right. That's the one I use stevia as well, like
Oh
stevia
yeah,
mostly.
stevia.
If I'm gonna use it, I don't really use them much. The only times that I could be like, I use them is when I get them in something that's like, you know, like
Yeah.
the convenience food. Like if I go to Starbucks, depending on what I'm doing with my meal or time of day, will I get the regular or will I get the sugar
Hmm.
free, which I believe is sucralose?
I think it is sucralose in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't usually buy artificial sweeteners. It's more in some products. But even with that, I do try and limit it. Like, protein powders, for example, one of the first things I look at is sucralose.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many of them that have it. I use protein powder every day. So I want a high quality protein powder. I don't want one with sucralose. That's why I use my trusty Drink Wholesome all the time. But they, for example, sweeten theirs with monk fruit or maple sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually prefer their monk fruit one compared to the maple sugar one.
Oh, that's good to know. I haven't tried them yet, and I really want to. I always recommend that brand to everybody.
Uh,
Just because I just haven't been using a lot of protein powder lately. Like
yeah.
really since last summer, but I know as it gets hotter and as sports like kid sports are coming up and I'm gonna be working a lot earlier, I'm gonna need it. So I'm gonna try it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's like the big takeaway from this, right? Is like because artificial sweeteners are generally considered safe when consumed in the acceptable amount. And all of these different sweeteners have like what is it? Allowed daily intake. Like they
Yeah.
have the amount that's like, okay, this is
Like a safe
generally
amount.
yeah, this is safe. So if it's something that you're using every day, or maybe you're using it multiple times a day, kind of like look at it and see, like, am I within that limit? I will say, like, there was a lot of, everything going around when aspartame started to be considered like a carcinogen or whatever.
Mhm.
People are like, oh my gosh, we're dying. Like the studies that they used for those to deem them like were the amounts were crazy high. They were really high and they were in rats, which again, we can't do ethical research on people and be like, ooh, take this really big dose and let's just see what happens. Like we can't do
Yeah.
that. So we go off of rats. So it's hard to tell if that would happen in humans, but we do know that it's likely. But also, are people eating that much? You know what? Some people might be. Like I know some people who drink a lot of
Like diet.
soda, fat free or sugar free. Like, and the other thing too, everyone is really different and everybody responds to them very differently. Like, for example, sugar alcohols like erythritol. That bugs me so bad. Like, I will know if I've had something that has it. I'm like, oh gosh, my stomach is hurting. And then there's other people that are like, oh, yeah, it's totally fine.
Hmm.
I should probably not consume it.
And
Like,
I think that's just another one of those reflection points where, yeah, everyone's going to be a little bit different. And with everything we talked about, it's also everything in moderation. Like we said, like we typically aren't buying artificial sweeteners, but yeah, maybe there are a few products that have it. And even like some of the things that do have sucralose in it, for example, that's usually not something I'm buying all the time. Like maybe it could be, I would say a good example, like if we're at the gas station and I did not prepare well and like the day is getting
yeah.
crazy and you're like, I need something quick and I'm grabbing like a protein bar. Yeah, it might not be the best quality protein bar, but it's better than like a bag of chips.
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of them right now, around me at least, are having like the RX bars. So then I go for like something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
really, just overall, I do try and limit them personally. And speaking of erythritol, that is one where a little bit does not bother me. Like there are some grain-free granolas that I like, and they have some erythritol in it. I can do those just fine, but I'm also not eating like a cup of it or even a half a cup. It's like a little
Like
handful.
a little sprinkle, yeah.
Yes, but then there's a brand of protein bars. They're called No Cow. They're not terrible, but they were an easy find. And those ones tear my stomach up, like
Mm-hmm.
very bloated. So it's probably the
Those
reason.
are mostly in like the keto
Yeah.
friendly snacks. Like keto products love to use sugar alcohols and I started noticing it when I think it was Catalina Crunch. I was like getting it
Mhm.
from Costco all the time because it was such a good brand. And it was something I was eating every morning there for a while because it's like higher protein and it has some fiber. And I was like, man, what's going on? And I feel like most people are so quick to be like, oh, it's the yogurt I'm eating, or oh, it's actually the protein in my protein powder, or it's this. And then usually it's like not. You know,
Mhm.
because I know that I'm fine with yogurt, especially Greek yogurt. I'm totally fine with it. Like, why is my stomach so messed up? Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm in a keto-friendly Catalina Crunch. So it's like, okay, well,
That's a good point to bring up too, is just like, how do I know to kind of like look for these products? Where, I mean, yes, you can look at every single label, but also a good indicator is if you have a product that says low sugar, no sugar added, keto, or something like a diet, something.
net carbs. Net carbs is
Yes,
the big
net
one. Yeah.
carbs. Those are kind of key labels that are on the front that'll give you a little bit more clue to, oh, let's check the back. Especially like I was looking up the other day, some yogurts, like those dessert flavored yogurts that are labeled as low calorie. Well, if it's supposed to taste like a chocolate cheesecake, whatever, and there's like
No,
no added
probably.
sugars, then that tells me, okay, there's something added to
Yeah.
it. So one of them I looked up, it had sucralose. Another one had monk fruit. So that would be one that I would choose the monk fruit
Mm-hmm.
over that.
And I think we're going to get into like some of the things that are being studied right now and what they're associated with. I will say, when it comes to your best bet, monk fruit right now seems like your best bet for non-nutritive artificial sweeteners, or it's not artificial, but you know what I mean, non-nutritive, so no calorie containing sweeteners.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, gosh, I meant to look up when these became all the rage. I know it was in the 2000s, like early 2000s at some point. And like you said, it was because we were having all these epidemics of people with obesity and diabetes and just everything really unmanaged. And I think where we're seeing a lot of the issues come from is we still haven't yet taught people lifestyle changes. We kind of are just like, replace this with this. You know what I mean? And here's the thing is like when I see people in the hospital and I'm getting diabetes education and I am only going to have them there for, you know, I'm never going to see them again, pretty much. One of the first things I ask them is, what do you drink throughout the day? And 9 times out of 10, it's a lot of soda and it is a lot of like sweet tea. And so for them, their number one question is, can I just switch to diet or zero? And is that going to do the best thing for them right now when they're in the hospital and they have like blood sugars in the 600s? Yeah, it is. Because now you're going to have not 2 liters of regular Coke, but something that's not raising your blood sugar all the time. But I think because like that's the only interaction a lot of dietitians have with people in a setting, they just use that as like, I can still have as much as whatever I want. It just needs to have these sweeteners in it instead. And I think like we're not getting down to the root problem.
And that's what's hard about it too, is as a dietitian, it's so hard to see someone just like one time.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot in the hospital setting, where when we are working one on one with people or even in metabolism makeover, like we're having like contact with you, like let's say at least 4 times in metabolism makeover, because it's a process. You can't get all this information out. I mean, a hospital, you're in there for maybe 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and then other times, like an initial session is at least like an hour or so. You can't get it all in an hour either. So it takes time. So we have to think about exactly say like what's going to be most helpful right now. And you mentioned Starbucks, how you'll switch between the full sugar syrup or a sugar-free syrup, and I do the same thing. And when I do get the sugar-free, it is a lot sweeter. I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa.
I
So
can't even take like one pump usually. I'm like, ugh.
yes.
All right, this is sweet.
Yeah. And how you can navigate that, like if you know, I always get the example, let's say you're running errands all day, like you're going to Target, you're going to, I don't know, like you're
Wherever else people
your
go.
birthday shopping, you're going to the outlet mall, like you
Yeah.
are going to be walking around all day. You make your Target, Starbucks, you make your Starbucks stop at Target, and you know you're going to be up walking around for a little bit. Yeah, just do the full sugar, and since you're walking around, that's going to help decrease that blood sugar
Mm-hmm.
rise in it. I would still kind of limit it. Like I wouldn't do 4 pumps of it personally, because that could see like 20 grams of added sugars right there.
Right.
if I'm doing full sugar, I do 1 or 2 pumps, and that's usually good for me. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but if you're someone who's like, that sounds absolutely terrible, it's basically black coffee, and you're just like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I have a sweet tooth and I want my sweets. The more you do this, your taste buds adjust. I talked about my frappe intake. I am a
Mhm.
sweet tooth girl. Like, I get it. You just got to try it out. And it is, again, one of those things where people think I'm absolutely insane. Where I'm like, we can not get rid of, but decrease these sugar cravings. And I had someone tell me that this week. She's like, I honestly did not believe you at all,
Mhm.
but I don't crave dessert every single night anymore. I'm like, I told you. I told you so.
Yes. And like this is where it comes in like the typical dietitian answer like it depends, because I mean people ask me like you're a dietitian, you eat regular sugar? Yes, I do. Like you're a dietitian, you use artificial sweeteners? Yes, I do. Like it depends.
Yeah. So, like,
It
the
depends.
artificial sugar could be like if you're grabbing coffee on your way into the office. Now,
Yes.
with that being said, like, if you're someone who's grabbing coffee every single day, I mean, I think that's a time to be more mindful of what are we putting into it. My coffee, like, actually, I don't drink coffee every day, so maybe it's a bad example. But like, if I talked about like if I do coffee at home, I do just the coffee, almond milk, and then like vital proteins, or I just do a splash of cinnamon, and that does it for me. So if you
Mhm.
are a daily coffee drinker, we got to be a little bit more mindful instead of deciding between like the sugar free versus full sugar
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah. And it's totally dependent on what you're going to go do after. What did you have for breakfast? Like those sort of things. So there's not like a one size fits all blanket answer. And I think that's what people want. But if you're on the fence of being like 0 calorie sweetener everything and like sugar is horrible, I would challenge you to kind of take a step back. It is okay to eat like real sugar, and I will say when I'm in a position, and again this is coming from a place where I don't have a ton of added sugar, I'm not eating a ton of added sugar anyways, so I know that someone who might be, this might be a different answer for them, but like for me, I would rather have the real sugar than the artificial sweetener. There's very few cases, like times where I do the artificial. It's usually like when you said, like when I'm grabbing it on my way into the office and I know I'm going to be charting for the next 4 hours, not really moving, I probably don't need
Mm-hmm.
real sugar. Okay. Because that's just not going to help me. And then I'm going to crash. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's dependent. You can totally have real sugar. And I would just be mindful because it all goes back to that habit, like those habit changes that I was talking about. I think we've just gotten really comfortable with being like, oh, there's like an easy way out. I don't need to change any of my habits. I can just have 0 calorie sweetener. And it's like, that's the issue, right? And that's why I like working with people in like the one-on-one setting or metabolism makeover setting, is because like we can progress, because there's no way I'm going to tell the person in the hospital that I'm giving education to that's drinking 2 to 3 liters of regular soda a day, just switch to water only. That's not going to help them. They're not going to do that. So I'm like, what can I do right now if they never see me again? Best course of action, right? But if I'm working with you outside, it might be like, okay, let's limit it. Let's lower it to, let's start off with that Diet Coke or Coke Zero, right? And then let's add in more water. And then like progressively we work towards the consumption of regular sugar and 0 calorie sugar being much less and still enjoying life and making that actual habit change. Because I think for a lot of people, it's just overwhelming. And so many doctors have got, it's the same thing with doctors. They don't see you often. So it's like, what's going to help your blood sugar right now? And like, what's going to help, your obesity? Oh, less sugar, right? And, we hear from doctors all the time, less calories, less calories. So it's like, oh, what's like a way around that? Let's use Splenda.
Sure, yeah. And like even Splenda, for example, that's like your sucralose. That is 600, about 600 times sweeter
Mm-hmm.
than table sugar, your sucrose. So it just kind of goes to show you like how much sweeter these things can actually be. And this, I mean, so many things can kind of come up when we start utilizing these artificial sweeteners, especially if we are overusing them. And that is like your taste preferences and cravings can actually change,
Mm-hmm.
where now you might have like an increased desire for more sweet foods because you're sweetening, even with these artificial sweeteners, you're not necessarily getting those extra calories, but now you're just having all these cravings and you're having to fight your cravings all the
Because
time.
it's more sweet. You're just used to
Yes.
like much more sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is why, like, even some new research is suggesting that adding in these artificial sweeteners may be actually associated with weight gain due to changes in those cravings, appetite regulation, and then it can even affect your gut microbiome
Mm-hmm.
with these artificial sweeteners. Like sucralose is one that can like kill off your good bacteria. I mean, with all this, there's more research needed, but it is, I think, more evolving research. And I will say, I don't know if you've kind of noticed this, but a lot of people I have that come from Weight Watchers specifically have a lot of bloating issues.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's because you get 0 points if you're using an artificial sweetener compared to like honey
Yep.
or even like the inflammatory oils. Like you get less points if you do fat free versus like an avocado or something like that. So that is something I do notice is a correlation there.
Because people will find ways. I talk to clients all the time that are like, I would find loopholes in the system. I would find it. And that's the majority of the time what I was trying to do. I didn't even like really realize what I was eating, how I should be eating. I was just like, let's find loopholes. And so suddenly it's like, oh, I can eat as much as this as I want and it's 0 points. I'm starving and no one has really told me how to eat still. And so I'm going to eat all of this, you know, and
And
then
I
it's
would do
like,
the same thing.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've talked about it before. Like my weird obsession with the 100-calorie Oreo thins, but I
Yes.
eat the whole box. You know, like I should have just had some Oreos, man. Like it's
Yeah. And I actually really do like those, but they like, I mean, yeah, you just need the whole box.
you
And
need the
Oreos
whole
are
box.
really
That one
sweet.
little pack isn't going to do it. First of all, it's done. I've already started. It's delicious. It's
Yeah.
very sweet. Let's keep it going. Yeah.
And a
But I
100 calories is not even enough for a snack, anyways, but
exactly.
that's
So
a topic for another day.
loopholes. Everybody's always trying to find loopholes instead of just eating normal food. But yeah, that's a big one. And that's hard too because we all have such unique microbiomes and the gut is connected to so many things. It's connected to, you know, how we are able to regulate our blood sugar. It's like linked to, you know, cognitive diseases later on in life. It's linked to a lot of things. And so maybe for some people it is messing up a certain part of their microbiome, or it's not because their gut bacteria is different and they're okay. But for some people, it might not be. And that was one of the questions. I know we'll get to it at the end, but that was one of the questions that I got was somebody told me if I just take a probiotic with my artificial sweeteners, it'll be okay because it like reverses the bad damage that it could do to the gut. And like, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's not true. And also, unless you're doing like a GI map and you're doing a lot of targeted like gut testing, you don't really know exactly what strains you need to be supplementing with anyways.
Exactly. And like there's other effects, like even if that was the solution to fixing the gut microbiome, there's all
Yeah.
these other things that kind of come along with the artificial sweeteners. I mean, there's people that get migraines and headaches just from consuming artificial sweeteners, especially aspartame's a big one
Yeah.
with diet sodas. And I mean, you could get headaches from them. We mentioned with the sugar alcohols, I feel like there's less effects with sugar alcohols than like the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
The sugar alcohols are more like individualized. You can kind of tell when you're like, wow, I'm super bloated after all that xylitol. But yeah, I mean, you can have these stomach issues that like you either just feel uncomfortable and then you have like bloating, you have gas, you have diarrhea, anything like that too. So that's other things that we also want to kind of be mindful of too is
Mm-hmm.
okay on the days that we have diet soda, or if you have a diet soda every day and you also have a headache every day, that's something we can kind of work with.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you the first thing that happens when people are like, oh man, I'm having a lot of bloating. It must be because I had too much fiber. I need to cut out vegetables. It will always be the vegetables and the fiber, and it's never going to be like the protein powder that you're using. And I'm like, no, it's not the vegetables.
Yeah.
That's not the answer. So,
I would say a lot of bloating. I get questions about should I avoid gluten, should I avoid dairy?
Mm-hmm.
Where poor gluten and dairy, they get such a bad rap.
No, they're just trying to live their life, and everyone's like, no. Like,
What
well,
I would do to eat some cottage cheese right now, let me tell you.
I know that's horrible. I love cottage cheese. But yeah,
It's,
no, it's always like, oh, it's these whole foods or it's this. And like, it's never the health foods I'm eating because those are healthy and those help me lose weight. And like, it's like, well, it's probably the super ultra processed, sweetened with non calorie sweeteners powder that you're having
yes.
or your diet soda, you know? So yeah. Some other things that, I mean, I'm telling you guys, I went down rabbit holes for the weight management and the insulin response and blood sugar response that some of these things can have. I'm not going to get super sciencey on you, but there are like more areas, recent areas of study that show like, okay, maybe some of these artificial sweeteners don't impact your blood sugar, but they might be impacting your insulin response and your insulin sensitivity over time, which if you're someone who is dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetes may not be great if you're having that 2 liter of Coke Zero every day to make your blood sugar better when it's impacting your insulin. We need insulin. We need it to work well.
And if you don't know a lot about insulin, just like a brief little blurb for you, insulin is what essentially shuffles your sugar into your cells once it's broken down into the bloodstream so that your body can use it for energy. So, yes, you're not technically adding sugar to your bloodstream, but we are having insulin released for not a great reason. And I don't want to get too far into this because I don't want people to get like stressed out about it. Insulin is like a fat storing hormone. It's an anabolic hormone, so we don't want it in our system all day long. With that being said, that doesn't mean we don't want insulin because
Correct.
we do need insulin as well. So it's kind of like a balancing act, which is exactly what we teach you. But yeah, that's all I'm going to kind of say about it right now.
And this is, we're seeing in research, it's very highly dependent on epigenetics too, right? Like, so your own genetic makeup might react differently to a certain food or compound or chemical that like your brother or sister or your best friend or whoever, like we are also individually different. So for some people, this may be impacting, you know, insulin sensitivity. It may be impacting like how you store fat. Like we just don't know. We can say for the general, you know, this is what we generally see, or this is what we see in mice who were created to be tested on and are very like, have all these like genetic things that are, they're created to be like a perfect genetic specimen in a certain way, or created to have a certain disease state so that we could test the disease states, right? So that's a controlled situation. We don't know when you're out in the world, everything else going on, like how this could be impacting you, because that's another thing. Like a lot of things are tested just really narrowly, and that's not, everything is always working together. So when you take an aerial view of what's going on, sure, it may be helping your blood glucose because you're not just flooding it with a ton of sugar, but we don't know what's happening in your pancreas and your intestines, with your heart health, your brain health. So everything works together all the time. There's all these different pathways that are being turned on, turned off, regulated, all these things. We just don't know.
Yeah. Is there, I feel like that gives like a good overview of the artificial sweeteners. Let's go into the questions. So I want to make sure we get these answered since you guys specifically asked them. So do you want to start off with the first one?
Yes. Do they cause cancer? So we know that
It depends.
depends. It's generally safe, right? But we do know that in certain amounts, chronic large amounts can cause certain cancers. In rats, we've seen it, or be correlated with certain cancers. Now, that's the same thing as like the sun, right? Like we're not just going to stay out of the sun. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, too much of anything can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kill yourself with water. You know what I mean? Like,
you can turn orange from like eating too many carrots.
Yeah, you know, like.
I mean, you have to eat a lot of carrots.
Yeah, granted. But so can they cause cancer? They are considered a carcinogen, but that doesn't mean that because you have a Diet Coke every now and then, like you're going to get cancer.
Yeah. Next question is, what is the best artificial sweetener to choose from? I wouldn't say there's like a best one. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
guess like artificial sweetener wise, like I said, sucralose is usually like my red flag one because it is in so many different products. So I just look at that. If it has sucralose, I usually don't grab it. But if you are looking to sweeten something, but you don't want to use like honey or table sugar or maple syrup, something like that, I would go with either the monk fruit or the stevia.
I agree. That's my general recommendation too. What's the next one? Let's see. Artificial sweeteners and Alzheimer's risk. So there have been a couple of epidemiological, I'm going to say that wrong, but I know what it is. So fine. Anyways, studies that basically what they look at is they like look at all these people who have developed a certain disease, so maybe Alzheimer's, and they do something like a food frequency questionnaire. So it's something where it's based off someone's bias, off of their recollection. There's a lot of room for error, but that's what we have when we're dealing with, humans and those type of studies. And there is an association between excessive intake of artificial sweeteners or beverages specifically and Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
With that
And
being
even
said,
added sugars too.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's also with added sugars because that's where we get into like the type 3 diabetes, right? Like Alzheimer's because of having poorly managed blood sugar and specifically like insulin resistance in the brain type thing. So for me, what that says as like a practitioner is there's lifestyle changes that were not happening throughout this person's lifetime. And I'm not saying like, oh gosh, it's because they did this. I'm just saying when I see excessive intake of sugar or even non-nutritive sweeteners and how it's associated with it, like there's so much more going on. So again, I don't think it's one of those things where it's like my grandpa has Alzheimer's because he drank Diet Coke.
Next question. Will they make my gut issues worse? We can't really say yes or no here. I mean, it depends what's going on in your gut, but I would say most likely it's not going to probably benefit you.
Yeah, because I think this question came in because someone has like celiac disease, which means like they have areas where it's already like permeable, right? Like in your intestines, like food is large chunks of proteins and stuff are getting out.
So I would say, like, with that information, if we know you already have some gut health issues, we're having like that leaky gut almost, we're having like an inflamed gut lining due to celiac, like if you are consuming gluten or you recently became gluten free because you just found out, then I personally would not do them because we do know that it's likely, we do know that they can cause gut health issues and
Yeah.
disrupt the microbiome. So if we're going to take care of that gut health,
We want to build your gut back up and make it healthy. And so I would say abstaining from anything that can really, really bother the gut would be a good idea. Like, I mean, including alcohol, including a lot of regular sugar, like including just, but again, I can't just be like, yeah.
yeah. And with this being said, too, like we're not saying you can never have anything sweet ever again. For example, like what this looks like on a real day. For breakfast, I had avocado toast with eggs, and then, I had strawberries. Oh, and I had part of a protein shake because I only wanted 2 eggs this morning. I need more protein. So I had part of like the drink wholesome protein. So I did have some monk fruit in that. For a snack, I had like one of the wild Zora soups. While we're doing this, I did the Poppi, which has the 5 grams of added sugar. So, I mean, halfway through the day, and I'm only maybe at like 10 total. And for lunch, I have a burger, I have veggies, and blueberries. So there's no added sugars there. For dinner, I don't even know what we're having for dinner. Oh, we're doing pork loin, some more veggies, and probably like potatoes or something. So definitely under probably 15 at
Right.
the most for the
Yeah,
day.
and like if you wanted to have like a little bit of dessert or something with that had regular sugar, you'd still be under, like you'd be okay.
Yeah.
And this is where I would say, like, because I know you don't have like diabetes or anything, like you could pair that regular sugar cookie, brownie, whatever you have in a way that's still gonna balance your blood sugar and
I
not be
will
really
say, like,
bad.
when I have been having some more like sweet cravings at night, like this week, I've been liking dates with a little bit of peanut butter on it and a few of the mini chocolate chips. So having that peanut butter is a great way to balance it out.
Oh yeah, I love dates with peanut butter.
Dates and cream cheese too. That's a good combination.
That is a good idea. A little bit of jelly.
I haven't tried that.
I like food, so we're not sitting here telling you guys like, ooh, don't enjoy your life. Like, most of us are dietitians because we're foodies too. That was like one of my favorite classes. It was like food science, and you get to like bake all the things and be like, ooh, it's doing this with the flour, and like you get to eat it. Oh my god.
Yeah, you get to learn like why your muffin is tunneling. Those are some of the classes we take, and then we also take biochemistry.
How do you make it flaky? How
Yeah.
do you use room temperature fat, or do you cut in your butter? You cut in your butter, by the way. But yeah, like those are like, am I a chef here? Also on the RD exam, it's very obnoxious. Like, if your cake didn't rise, I'm gonna be so helpful.
Okay.
So helpful. But anyways, okay, let's get into our last question. So should I eat artificial sweeteners? It depends, honestly. Like, hopefully we've helped you guys have more information and you're able to see when would it maybe be appropriate, like what one should I choose, and make that choice for yourself. But
it's a personal choice, and we kind of explained how and if we use them in our life too. So if you have more questions about that, feel free to DM us.
Yes.
Next question, does monk fruit taste funny? I'm trying to think like what I've used it for.
I would say I know stevia tastes funny with cold things. That's also another food science thing. Some of these things do well with cold. Some of them do better with hot. Some of them have a bitter taste if you use them in certain situations. And also, I think it's like super dependent on your taste buds.
Yeah. Like, because I guess, like I said, I did have monk fruit in my pantry. I can't even remember what I did use it for. Like, I have it in my protein powder, and I like the protein powder. But some people are like, I cannot stand monk fruit. So
I've gotten like the monk fruit drops from Trader Joe's. I've added them to like plain Greek yogurt that does kind of taste bitter. Like, one of my kids loves it with the stevia drops, and my other one's like, ah, this is horrible. I'll just take it regular. So I think, it just depends, really.
It's totally up to you.
Yeah. What are good alternates or alternatives?
We kind of answered this one. I mean,
I was gonna say it depends again, but
depends on what you're looking for. But if you're thinking about like you're wanting to decrease added sugars, we talked about this in the last episode, but when decreasing added sugars, don't just think about it of what can I replace it with necessarily. Slowly cut back, and you'll notice those taste buds change. But if you also want to sweeten something, but you don't want to add a bunch of added sugars, go for the monk fruit, go for the stevia. If you're looking at to sweeten it and we're going for the real thing, my personal favorite is honey or maple syrup.
Yeah, I'm a big honey fan. But yeah, let's actually make some lifestyle changes. Like, why are we wanting to decrease the sugar? Why? Like, so I think, with diet culture, we've kind of just been taught, like, let's find the loopholes. Like, I'm not eating sugar, so really just figure out, like, okay, why do I want to decrease it? And then what does that look like? Do I just want to make a swap for still consuming just as much as I was, but the artificial sweetener? Or, because I will say, if you give it a chance, you will find that you really don't need that much sweetness. And I'm not trying to sit here and be like one of those dietitians. It's like, just eat fruit if you want something sweet. But I will say, like, for me, I have worked towards that, and I feel totally fine. Like, if I want something like a dessert, I eat it. And it's to the point where, like, I probably don't need all of it because it is so sweet. And, like, fruit really does do it for me. I haven't always been that way, but,
That's a good point for, like, smoothies, where I don't add any type of sweetener to my smoothies because I just utilize the sweetness from the fruit. I mean, I guess technically the protein powder, it does have it, but like I don't personally add honey or anything to it because it's plenty sweet for me.
All I know is, like, if my husband can start to tolerate things less sweet, I know anyone can. He has the biggest sweet tooth of anyone I've ever met in my life. Like, it's amazing. how much sugar he could eat.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm like, whoa, like, how are you not like a kid at a carnival? How are you not vomiting right now? You know, and he's like really been like, all right, I'm gonna get a grip on this because, you know, I'm getting older and I'm like, whatever. And like, even now, sometimes they'll be like, oh, wow, this is like super sweet. And I'm like, oh, did hell freeze over? Did it freeze over? What
Yeah.
did you say? Have you been abducted by aliens? Who are you? So, there's hope.
Yes.
There's hope.
Yes.
He's
So
gonna listen to this.
we hope we got all your artificial sweetener questions answered. We'll probably put up another question box to follow up this episode just to make sure we covered everything. There's not any other additional questions that pop up. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this little 2-part series. And like we said, any other questions come up, we'll put a question box. We will talk to you guys next week with a new episode.
Yeah, I think we're talking about starchy carbs.
Yes, that'll be a good one.
So stay tuned.
But also, we should probably put up a question box for that too.
Oh yeah,
lots of questions on carbs
all the time, every day.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.